Candace Owens came to control the narrative. Jasmine Crockett came with receipts. And when the moment came, she held her ground and dropped a line that silenced the room. The lights were hot. The makeup artist had made her rounds. Behind the cameras, producers signaled silently. 4 chairs, 3 panelists, 1 moderator. It was Real America, the no-holds-barred late-night segment on WJTX out of Phoenix. Famous for heat, not harmony. You didn't show up here to debate. You showed up to plant a flag. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat still, not out of nerves, but precision. Her blazer, deep cobalt blue. The kind of blue that didn't just speak, it commanded. Across from her, Candace Owens, legs crossed, smile sharp, eyes locked. This wasn't about the topic. It never was. It was about control. The moderator leaned in. Congresswoman Crockett, you've been vocal about disparities in our justice system. But others, like Candace, argue the system works. That race is too often used as a scapegoat. Your response? Jasmine didn't blink, didn't shift. Her voice was low, steady. The problem isn't that race is mentioned too often. The problem is that it's ignored, until someone ends up dead. Candace smiled, tight and polished. With respect, Congresswoman, she cut in. It's dangerous to keep selling victimhood, to teach Black Americans that everything bad in their lives is rooted in racism. That's dishonest. I'm living proof. Off camera, a few heads nodded. It was the same dance. Candace, the outlier, used herself as the counterpoint, then erased the rule. But Jasmine wasn't here to be steamrolled. She leaned in. So, you believe systemic racism is exaggerated? Candace didn't miss a beat. Absolutely. The numbers don't lie. We've got more Black millionaires than ever. Celebrities, powerhouses. Victimhood has become currency. The moderator glanced at Jasmine. She said nothing. Yet. That was her style? Let the silence stretch. Let the room shift. And it did. Jasmine turned calmly back to Candace. That's interesting, she said. Because I was reading a public record just last night. A discrimination complaint from 2007. Filed by you. Candace blinked. Just once. Excuse me, she said, laughing. I don't know what you're talking about. Jasmine reached into her binder, unfolded a sheet of paper. Filed with the Stanford Board of Education. You claimed you were the victim of racial harassment in high school. Not only did you file it, you won a settlement. Am I wrong? Candace opened her mouth. No sound. The moderator cleared his throat. Let's keep this respectful, Jasmine cut, in voice calm even. This is respectful. I'm not attacking. I'm asking how someone can spend years telling Black kids that racism isn't real, when she once needed protection from it. Something in the room shifted. The camera guys felt it. The producers felt it. The audience at home had stopped flipping channels. Candace adjusted her mic. Not because it needed it, but because she needed the beat. That's ancient history, she said at last. I was a teenager. It was a different time. Jasmine didn't move. But you were telling the truth, weren't you? A long pause. Then softly, yes, I was. Then that is the point, Jasmine said. Because the truth doesn't expire. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was earned. Candace stared, jaw tight. She reached for control again. We're losing the thread here. That moment from my childhood doesn't discredit the conversation about how race is weaponized. Jasmine cut in, voice cool, as steel. Actually, it's exactly the thread. And with that, Candace realized, This wasn't her narrative anymore. She was sitting in Jasmine's now. They say people cry racism to dodge responsibility, Jasmine said, cool and unshaken. But when it happened to you, it was real enough to go to court. She let that hang for a second. Real enough for them to pay out. Candace opened her mouth, a retort loading. But Jasmine leaned in, voice low, eyes locked. You said you were harassed with racial slurs, that your school failed to protect you, that you feared for your safety. She paused, not for drama but clarity. And you weren't wrong. But let's be honest. You didn't overcome racism by denying it. You got justice by calling it out. A quiet murmur swept through the audience. Subtle but unmistakable. The moderator fidgeted, looked off camera. All right, maybe let's steer back to current policy. Congresswoman. Jasmine didn't yield. This is current policy. Because policy is shaped by patterns. And patterns don't disappear just because someone stopped talking about them. She glanced at Candace. That includes her pattern. Candace exhaled sharply, like forcing the air out. You don't know me. I know your words, Jasmine said. That's enough. Candace sat up straighter, louder now. You're twisting this. People change. I've evolved. I've learned that too many folks lean on victimhood to make a living, and it holds our community back. Jasmine shook her head. You didn't grow past it, she said. You grew from it. You took that pain and built a platform. And now, instead of helping the next kid stand up when they're targeted, you're out here telling them it's all in their head. That landed. Not just in the room, but through every screen tuned in. Candace laughed, but there was no joy in it. So now I'm a hypocrite because I'm not angry about my past? No, Jasmine said evenly. You're a hypocrite because your story isn't the one you're selling. You benefited from a system you now say doesn't exist. The studio stilled. Jasmine turned to the cameras, eyes direct, voice steady. Here's the reality. Racism didn't end because Candace Owens became successful, and pretending it did doesn't help the kid still trying to graduate without being profiled, or the job applicant who has to change her name to get a call back, or the driver praying a traffic stop doesn't turn into a funeral. One of the panelists, a former state senator, cleared his throat. Maybe we should, pivot to solutions. But the moment wasn't moving. Not yet. Candace leaned back in. You think you're helping people by making them feel like victims? No, Jasmine replied, calm, grounded. I'm helping them take power. By keeping them angry? No, Jasmine said. By reminding them what it took to earn that power. You tell them to stop complaining. But you filed a complaint, and you were right to. You just forgot what it felt like the second you got a microphone. The moderator tried to cut to commercial, but even his hesitation said it all. This was the moment, and Jasmine wasn't finished. Candace had built her brand on control, composed, unflinching, commanding. But tonight her rhythm was off. Jasmine wasn't shouting. Wasn't mocking, wasn't even angry. She was just standing, solid, unmoving, and pointing out that Candace wasn't. Candace reached for a lifeline, an old standby. Black Americans are only 13% of the population, but account for over 50% of violent crime. That's not a feeling. That's FBI data. Jasmine turned her head slowly, voice steady. Tone now with steel. Are you seriously doing this? Quoting cherry-picked stats like scripture? It's not cherry-picked. It's real. It's skewed, Jasmine shot back. Because policing isn't neutral. Surveillance isn't neutral. You know how many crimes in wealthy white neighborhoods never make it into those stats? Because they're handled quietly. You can't excuse violence because of a zip code, Candace snapped. No one's excusing anything, Jasmine said. I'm saying the system doesn't see everyone the same. And you know that. You live that. When you were 17. For the first time that night, Candace looked unsure. She glanced at the moderator again. He met her eyes, but didn't throw the lifeline. So she pivoted. You know what's exhausting? She said. Being told I'm not black enough, or that I'm a traitor because I don't blame racism for everything. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. No one's calling you a traitor. I'm calling you dishonest. There's a difference. Candace crossed her arms. So now people can't even think differently. Of course they can, Jasmine replied. But when you use your story to dismiss millions of others, that's not thinking differently. That's selling people a lie, with your name on it. Candace scoffed. I'm not selling anything. Jasmine's tone didn't waver. You're on book tours, podcasts, paid speaking gigs. You're selling a brand. And that brand depends on pretending you never filed that complaint. Never. Needed help. Never got hurt. Candace's jaw tightened. Her foot tapped, involuntarily. A camera caught it. The moderator finally leaned forward. Maybe we pivot. No, Jasmine said flat. Let's finish this point. Because it matters. The room stilled again. Not tense, just alert, like everyone was waiting for a foe. Sound that hadn't come yet. Every time you tell a black kid they're making excuses, Jasmine said, you're ignoring the fact that you once needed someone to believe you, to take your fear seriously, to step up on your behalf, and now you call that weakness. Candace didn't answer. I'm not here to win a debate, Jasmine went on. I'm here because too many people watching don't have anyone speaking directly to what they've lived through, and I won't let someone erase that just to score a headline. Silence. Deep enough that even the air conditioners seemed to pause. Then Candace broke it. Not with substance, but with a jab. Well, she said, at least I don't cry on cue and beg for sympathy. That did it. Jasmine laughed, not mocking, not bitter. Just the kind of laugh that slips out when someone hits empty. I never asked for sympathy, she said. Just accountability. But if that's too heavy, I can carry it alone. But Candace didn't know. Jasmine wasn't done. Candace straightened in her seat, smoothed her skirt, turned toward the camera, trying to find footing again. This is performance politics, she said. Congresswoman Crockett wants to go viral, not be honest? Jasmine sat still, hands light in her lap. You keep calling it performance, she said. But all I've done is ask questions you don't want to answer. No spin, no slogans, just facts. Candace gave a clipped laugh. People like you need racism to fuel your careers. Jasmine didn't even look at her. She turned to the moderator, then to the audience. Let me be clear, she said, voice low but firm. I didn't get elected by telling people they were victims. I got elected by telling them they deserved better, and then fighting like hell to deliver it. Candace cut in, louder now. You got elected by selling fear and division, just like the rest of them. That's when Jasmine turned to her. Not angry, not smug, just steady. You can't rewrite history just because the cameras are on. That line landed like a thunderclap. No one moved. Even the equipment seemed to hesitate. Candace opened her mouth, closed it. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice calm. You filed that complaint because you were scared. Because you were young, and black, and targeted. And it was real. Your fear mattered then, and it still does. But pretending it didn't happen, pretending you never needed help, that's not strength. That's survival disguised as denial. Candace tried to shift. So now I can't change my perspective? Of course you can, Jasmine said. But don't gaslight the people walking the same road you once cried for help on. The moderator sat silent. One panelist reached for a water bottle slowly, afraid the sound might snap the room back into motion. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of betraying my community, Candace said, her voice rising just slightly. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. I didn't accuse you. I reminded you. That's what accountability looks like. Candace laughed again, but it was defensive now. I've sat across from a lot of people who try to make me feel small. You're not the first. I'm not trying to make you feel small, Jasmine said, quiet. I'm trying to remind you, you're bigger than this. That line didn't strike like a blow. It hit like a mirror. And for a moment, something cracked behind Candace's eyes. Jasmine didn't press. She let it sit. The moderator finally cleared his throat. We're heading to a break. But before we do, I'd like to say something, Jasmine said, her voice rising just enough to shift the tone. She turned to the camera. Not the room, the people at home. To anyone who's ever been told their experience doesn't count, if someone made you feel like you imagined the pain they didn't want to deal with, don't let them erase you. Don't let them polish over the truth just because it's inconvenient. You matter, even when the people with microphones pretend you don't. She paused. Let it breathe. But while viewers were catching their breath, Candace was trying to find hers. By the time the show cut to commercial, the internet had already caught fire. A raw, unedited clip leaked from the control room. No cuts, no Polish, just Jasmine holding her ground, and Candace caught off guard. One line was everywhere. You can't rewrite history just because the cameras are on. It echoed across social media like a lightning strike. Memes, hashtags, reactions from accounts that usually stayed silent. Even neutral voices were posting screenshots and clips. There was no spin fast enough to cover it. Backstage, Candace paced, her heels suddenly too tight. Her assistant whispered numbers she didn't ask for. Top 5 on X. Over 4 million views and climbing. Candace didn't respond. She was busy trying to retell the moment in her head, searching for where the power slipped. Meanwhile, in the green room, Jasmine sat still. Her phone buzzed. She didn't touch it. She hadn't come for a fight. She came to tell the truth, and America had listened. Within an hour, pundits chimed in. A centrist radio host from Florida said, I don't care where you stand. Jasmine Crockett did what we beg our leaders to do. She came prepared, and she stood her ground. Another tweeted, Candace Owens met her match tonight, and it showed. But the real impact wasn't with the pundits. It was in the people, teachers, students, nurses, fathers. 1,000 commenters with one voice. She said what we've been waiting to hear on national TV. Others dug up the records. The complaint, the settlement, the old interviews. The dots lined up. Candace had once asked for protection. Now she was branding that same fear as weakness. Later that night, Candace posted a statement. I'll never apologize for evolving. Yes, I experienced racism and I overcame it. Not by dwelling on it, but by refusing to let it define me. Some people can't handle that kind of strength. But the replies didn't fall in line. Evolving isn't erasing. You don't get to deny the bridge you crossed on. You can't hide behind growth while stepping on others trying to grow. And then Jasmine finally posted, Not a thread, not a takedown, just a quiet message. Truth doesn't need a headline. It just needs someone willing to hold it steady. 4 hours in, her clip had over 15 million views across platforms. Even people who hadn't seen the show were quoting her. Producers shook their heads in quiet awe. "I knew it would blow up," one said, "but I didn't know it would land like that." Behind the desk, the host reviewed the footage. He looked up and said what the country was already thinking. Candace brought the volume. Jasmine brought the receipts. But this wasn't just a viral moment. It was something deeper. And by morning, people were asking the question out loud. Why did it hit so hard? Because it wasn't just a clash. It was a reckoning. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just exposed Candace Owens. She had exposed something bigger. In coffee shops from Philadelphia to Detroit, Oakland to Birmingham, the conversation hadn't ended with the credits. It had spilled into the streets, onto bus benches, classroom whiteboards, group chats, and late-night FaceTime calls. At a bus stop in Tulsa, a woman leaned toward her coworker and said, "She wasn't even mad. That's what hit hardest. She didn't yell. She just stood still, like she'd stood there before." Because she had. To many watching, Jasmine wasn't just debating. She was embodying what too many had lived, being told it didn't happen while it was happening, being told to move on while the wound was still bleeding, being told they were imagining the pattern everyone else had been trained to ignore. But Jasmine didn't come to spin circles or shout down anyone. She came to put the truth on the table and leave it there, even if it made people squirm. Back in D.C., lawmakers were watching too. Some called, others texted quietly. A staffer from a neighboring office wrote, "She didn't just win that debate, she modeled accountability with grace. That's rare." But it wasn't just rare. It was overdue because most political debates on TV become noise. Interrupted answers, raised voices, half-truths spun like carnival rides. Jasmine did the opposite. She slowed it down. She made the room quiet enough for truth to echo. One young black woman in San Jose posted a video from her car. Her eyes were wet, her voice steady. "I've watched Candace Owens for years. Every time she said people like me were just playing the race card, it hurt. But when Jasmine brought up that old case, Candace's case, it was like someone finally said it out loud. We're not crazy, we're not imagining it, and we're not alone." That's what made it matter. Jasmine wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. She wasn't trying to destroy Candace. She was trying to remind all of us, you can't heal what you erase. And silence doesn't mean peace. It just means someone gave up trying to be heard. It hit especially deep in classrooms, courtrooms, and clinics, where the pattern never needed explaining, where resumes get discarded because of a name, where voices get interrupted before they finish, where justice bends depending on who's watching. A middle school teacher in Little Rock wrote in her journal that night, "My students always ask if racism is still real. I used to dance around the answer. Tomorrow I'll just show them the clip." Because Jasmine wasn't there to prove herself. She didn't need to. She was there to stay still while someone else danced around the truth and eventually stumbled over it. The lesson wasn't about parties or platforms. It wasn't left versus right. It was simpler. If you live through pain and then deny it later for points, that's not strength. That's pretending. And people know the difference. Yes, Candace had power, a platform, millions of followers. But that night, Jasmine had something stronger, credibility. And credibility doesn't come from followers. It comes from consistency, from showing up the same way, when the cameras are on and when they're not, from matching your past to your present, without pretending the in-between didn't happen. That's why it landed like it did, because people didn't just see a takedown. They saw a reckoning. They saw a woman speak truth, not for applause, not for clout, but because it needed to be said, without yelling, without theatrics, without turning it into a show. But one question still hung in the air, quiet, but undeniable. A question that would shape how both women were remembered after that night. Because while the dust hadn't settled, the contrast was already crystal. Candace Owens went into full reaction mode. She did what she always did when cornered. She launched a podcast that same night. She fired off tweets accusing the network of ambush tactics. She called Jasmine's calm political theater. She warned her base that truth is now dangerous to the left. But this time, something was different. Her usual echo chamber didn't bounce back as loud. Her base was still there, but quieter, as if even they knew she hadn't walked away with the win. More telling? People outside her orbit weren't buying it, no matter how fast she tried to spin it. The center wouldn't hold. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett didn't go on a press tour. She didn't do 5 interviews or chase a viral high. She posted one photo, her, sitting in the studio chair, hands folded, calm, still. Beneath it, just 4 words. Hold your truth steady. No hashtags, no jabs. Just the same poise she carried through the entire debate. And somehow, that silence said more than 1,000 retweets. It wasn't just a viral moment. It was a shift.